come back
I
next
think
month.
some start a little bit earlier.
What is it that you
and
want
pretty
to do?
traditional.
So it's
and
informational
the
stormwater.
kids here, they don't start till like 3.
So it's not.
That's great.
I was checking.
It was,
In August.
May
So yeah,
once in a while, so I'm looking.
yeah, we can certainly. No, that's okay. Yeah, we can.
So they're at
We can
Columbus.
certainly.
But all you want can do for next month.
It's all, it's all, I'll go meetings here and there, but other than that, it's more just the media pictures and stuff like
Sorry for the trouble.
that. It's all right.
I was checking my email before I drove over. I realized I had.
Weren't they just,
Yeah.
just bothering the founder of that, of a bunch of different brands, that's one of the ones that he owns.
Yeah, so that was L Brands.
Yes,
Yeah.
right, he just passed away a little while ago, right?
Yeah, so we split up with L Brands, so. now
That's why,
it's
I
just,
heard something about
Yeah.
that. How long have you worked with him?
Since October.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So were you there when it still was L-Rams?
when it was transitioning over,
Part of that problem.
yeah, to fill out, yeah, a couple of, yeah, Victoria's site. Yeah, so, Bath and Body Works, yeah, now it's split across.
I didn't know I was doing double duty today.
Yeah.
I found out at 4:30 when Nick was leaving.
Don't
That's
let
when
them
I
pick
learned
up
that.
that bad.
That's
That's not gonna work.
No, for
It
sure.
always takes longer than it can possibly take.
Yeah.
I had no idea a couple of years ago.
Yeah, even Victoria. 6 billion they did in sales.
Big boys.
Yeah.
This is the big boy category.
Yeah.
I believe we're live and ready to go.
All right. Well, are we recording?
I believe so. I didn't hear it say it, but we are online and we are streaming to YouTube.
To the
So
world. We're all watching. Well, welcome, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the City of Harbor Springs, Michigan Planning Commission meeting, Thursday, July 20th, 2023. And this meeting is now in session. Jeff, would you like to call roll?
absolutely. Vanessa Warren. Bill Mulder.
Here.
Bob Thoma.
Here.
Nancy Rondell.
Here.
Rick Tarczynski.
Here.
Barry Leskard. Bob Thoma, or Mark Viday.
Who's got his name tag chipped down?
We have a quorum.
We have a quorum.
I was testing.
Yep, and speaking of roll call, one of our members had to resign. George Pete, his schedule just got the best of him with his international travel and other commitments, and he just had to resign. And so we have a position open on the planning commission, and we would love to fill that, and are wide open to any residents that would like to play a role in a lot of good, interesting decisions. So if you know someone, have them fill out the paperwork that's on the city website to volunteer. So a little bit about your background and that kind of thing. So, all right, and thanks to everyone who turned out tonight. And this is the, oh, I'm sorry, we're gonna approve the minutes. Yep, we have 2 sets of minutes to approve. The first is from our last regular meeting, which was back in May 18th.
I move to approve the May 18th meeting minutes.
We have a motion to approve the minutes from May 18th. We have a second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Minutes have been approved. The other minutes that we have to consider is the minutes of the joint meeting that took place at Holy Childhood with members of various city commissions and boards, as well as the public. And that took place on Monday, the 23rd of May, wasn't it?
May.
Maybe back in May. Okay, great. Do we have any comments on those minutes or corrections? No. Okay. We have a motion to approve these minutes.
I'll move to approve the May 22nd special joint meeting minutes.
Great. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Second from Emily. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, so minutes are approved. Okay, next thing on the agenda for members of the public who came out tonight is a chance to address your planning commission. And any member of the public can have 3 minutes to tell us what's on your mind and things that we ought to know. And it's fair game to talk about whatever you think is helpful for the community, other than the specific things on the agenda tonight. So this is kind of free form. Is there anybody who has any input for the planning commission? And nobody's on Zoom, so. Okay,
Nobody's on Zoom. We have one participant.
we do have someone on.
Me.
Oh,
I'm the
okay.
participant.
Great. All right, then let's move into old and new business. And the first thing on the agenda is a special land use request for 545 Arbor Street home occupation. And what should we know about this, Jeff?
So this is a request from Naomi Behrman. They have a property on Arbor Street, and she's requesting to operate a dog grooming operation within her home. We do have language in the zoning code regarding home occupations and how they can be done. And right now that language states that they can be done in that zoning district that she's in, R1C, but that it does require special land use approval from the planning commission to make sure that there won't be, that it won't negatively impact the neighbors too much. And it's an opportunity for us to review that and provide a potential approval.
Okay. Why don't we hear from the applicant, Ms. Behrman? Do you have anything you'd like to tell us about your
Do you want me to
plans?
stand up or?
Sure.
Um,
And could you introduce yourself officially?
I'm Naomi Behrman. I am the applicant for the home occupation at 545 Arbor Street. I imagine most of you have read the proposal and it's pretty self-explanatory. I'd like to just shortly go into the background of how I got here today. I've been a dog groomer roughly 17 years now. I started as a kind of a midlife changeover, and it's something I have a huge passion for. We lived downstate. I groomed at different shops. I also had a home business, which I developed because I have a special needs daughter who does not drive, and I was able to work around her schedule. Some of you may know Mindy. She used to work at Ace Hardware. She now works at Culver's in Petoskey, and again, needs a driver. So most recently, I've been working at Little Traverse Bay Humane Society as a dog groomer for almost 3 years. In June, I gave notice that I wanted to retire from there due to some discrepancies with my standards and my employer's standards. So I gave notice. They asked me to stay through the end of the summer since we're swamped with many seasonal people. So I agreed to stay till August 31st, intending to retire. In the meantime, I started explaining to my regular customers who I've been seeing for several years, every 6 to 8 weeks, that I was planning on retiring. And I got a lot of feedback from them begging me not to retire. So in the meantime, I started rethinking what I was going to do, and it came back to me that a home business at a very small level would probably be the best thing for me to do for me, my regular customers, and also to have access to taking my daughter to work and to other activities that she needs rides to. So my vision has materialized up into this. We have a bi-level home on Arbor Street. I envision working during the week doing 3 to 4 dogs a day, having them gone out of the house by 3 o'clock. Customers to pull into my driveway, bring the dogs into the house where they would be taken down to the basement, where I would perform my grooming duties and promptly have the customers come back to pick up their dogs. So that's basically what I want to do. If there's any questions or concerns, I'd be happy to answer those.
Commission members, any questions for Ms. Behrman?
The write-up was very thorough. The proposal was very thorough.
I might recommend this is a special land use request, so we do need to have a public hearing. We should do a motion to open a public hearing when we take questions from the audience and comments.
Great. I have a question. How long does it take to do a dog generally? Your full treatment?
It depends what kind of dog, of course. For a bath, it can take 45 minutes. For a wash and a dry, and a brush out, it can take up to 3 hours for a standard poodle. So, my timeline from 8 till 3 o'clock would allow me plenty of time to do between 3 and 4 dogs a day. I imagine that I would be done well before 3 o'clock.
And how would you schedule your customers?
Okay, the way we do it now at most places that the dogs are dropped off between 8 and 9 in the morning. So there would be maybe 3 or 4 cars coming in, dropping off their dogs and leaving. And then as I proceed through the day, bathe each dog and then groom each dog. And as they're done, calling the owners to pick up. So it's a little bit staggered in the morning, but it's more staggered at a pickup time.
Any other questions from?
Do you do cat toenails? You do cat toenails?
Oh, sure. I can show you how to do them too.
I can, but she bites.
Okay, well, let's get on to we should probably open it up for a public hearing as Jeff recommended. And so
I move to open the meeting up to a public hearing.
we have a motion. Do we have a second? Mark seconds it. Motion on the table to open the public hearing. A motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. All right, the public hearing is open. Is there anyone in the audience that would care to comment?
Margie Marks, 818 Arbor Street. I do not have a dog. I do not plan on having a dog, but I know that if I did, I would want Naomi to groom that dog. More importantly, though, for this in our community, I read through the whole proposal, and Nancy, I thought it was really thorough. I know that Naomi is very conscious about the community and her neighbors near and far. And she's a wonderful communicator and a great neighbor. And I know that she would deal with anything that would come her way and make it as easy for everyone in the neighborhood, you know, if and when this were to happen. The fact, I like the staggering part, I think that's important, so that that's something that as a neighbor, you know, you wouldn't want to have a ton of things happening all at once. I think that it's very well thought out, and you know, I just think it would be a great thing for the community, and I know she would take care of dogs and people alike.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to comment? Could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, Tony Johnson, 430 Maple Street. I'm here in support of the application. I did send in an email, but it was a little late to make it in the packet, so I'll just summarize. The applicants, Naomi and Mike Berman, are outstanding members of our community. This application serves to provide a much needed service in this community and will not in any way detract from the quiet and charming appeal of Uptown East. So we fully support this request for the special use land permit.
Thank you very much. Anyone else care to comment?
Pam Tarczynski, 465 State Street. I live 3 or 4 blocks away from Naomi and Michael. but I've known them for a long time, and I read through carefully Naomi's proposal, which I thought was wonderfully thorough. The part that caught my attention because it was a concern that I had, and I thought she addressed it well, was she plans to park her customers in their driveway, which I know is a big generous driveway, so there's plenty of room for them to do that. Because I had a little bit of a safety concern that the cars would be, I want the cars off the street and I want the people and their animals going in and out of the cars safely and at a comfortable pace. I don't want anybody rushing around. So of all the details that Naomi put into her plan, that was the one that struck me as being very community-minded, neighborhood-minded, and good for people and pets.
Thank you. Anyone else care to comment?
Michael Mock, 2243 Hearthside Drive in Petoskey. We're part of that community that arrives on schedule every 6 months and then depart at the end of that 6 months. But Naomi has taken care of us very well for the last almost 3 years. And we were part of that force driving her. You can't do this. We have 2 dogs. But as retirees go, fuzzy white dogs walk in the park with all our neighbors. We'd appreciate it if you'd allow her to do this.
Thank you for commenting and for coming tonight. Any other comments?
I'm not the applicant, I'm the property owner, the co-property owner, but Michael Behrman, 545 Arbor Street. Naomi operated a very similar fashion home grooming business in Rochester, the city of Rochester, downstate, which has a lot of similarities actually to the neighborhood in which we live. And that was a business that lasted 10 years with neighbors, with sidewalks, with kids. I think Naomi was a model home business owner. I think Margie said it well. She communicated really well with the neighbors. I can't remember a complaint from any of the neighbors in regard to noise, traffic, dog feces or whatever. And just a model home business owner, you know, I say that objectively because if I felt there was concerns, I'd be the first one to tell Naomi, and she probably knows, but so this is not a new rodeo for her. She's done this before in a very similar neighborhood successfully with little to no disturbance. So thank you.
Thank you for your comment. All right, any other comments from the public? All right, then we probably ought to have a motion.
I move to close the public meeting.
Perfect. Do we have a second? Close it. Second from Mark Boudet. Motion's on the table and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please say nay. All right, public hearing is closed. Why don't we go over to John Icoangeli? Tell us about your analysis.
My analysis, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, the application was pretty thorough in terms of addressing all of the key points.
You can sit down, Ms. Behrman, and relax.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Application was thorough. We went through the review standards that are outlined in the ordinance. We found nothing that was not satisfactorily discussed. We proposed 3 motions for the planning commission: motion to approve with conditions, and motion to deny. Under the motion to approve with conditions, we were recommending 5 conditions that were addressed in the application. All patrons would park on the premises in the existing driveway. No patron parking allowed on Arbor Street. Hours of operation would be Monday through Friday, hours of 8 to 3 p.m. No kennel located on the property, no overnight boarding, no business sign allowed as the conditions. So I'll leave it up to the commission to make the decision, but the analysis was pretty thorough. Application was very well put together.
All right.
If I could ask a quick follow-up question, no kennel shall be located on the property, are we meaning like an outdoor kennel?
Outdoor. No outdoor kennel.
I have a comment on number 2. Between the hours of 8 and 3. That kind of leaves out the what ifs in real life. She's not done by 3. So she's gonna get in trouble.
Unless there was a complaint.
You know, she starts something and can't finish it by 3.
Or a customer's late.
Or if a customer's late, or. So that's my comment.
I think it's okay to leave the hours out. I mean, I
Yeah,
think,
yeah.
that happens.
I'm willing.
Or we can say generally.
The reason where I came up with 8 to 3 is in her application,
Right.
she had
Yes.
mentioned Monday through Friday from 8 to 3 PM.
Mhm.
So that was the applicant's
Right.
submission. I wasn't picking.
If we wanted to and just not. put the
I trust you to toe the
I
line.
really want people out by
I was gonna say,
3.
she wants them out by 3.
She wants the hours.
I'm gonna do my best.
Yeah.
That's good enough for me.
If someone can't pick up their dog, it's staying in a crate in the basement till they get there, so. it's-
We're not gonna mean we can't monitor.
Other thoughts from members?
Hey, what happens to the special land use if the property is sold? Does it continue on as a business property?
As a home occupation.
Okay, is that something that we're going to reevaluate if it is sold or put in for a condition?
With the property. Could we put it in as a condition? Is that like
Yeah.
to say this only continues with this owner? Can we do that?
We're kind of limited, when we do the approval, we're approving that property,
As
that
a
it's
special
suitable
land
to
use.
have that special land use as a home occupation. Any future owner would still be subject to the same conditions, but it would go with the
It goes
property.
with the property.
But it has to be this sort of business,
Yeah, it has to be this specific.
this
occupation.
specific business
With these
goes with this
specific.
property.
This is special use.
Yes.
Why is that? That should the property be sold, that it doesn't return to its former.
State statute.
And it's a special land use of the property, not of the owner.
Not of the
That's where that happens. And that's out of our control. So if we want to put hours in, if we don't feel
It's
comfortable.
my recommendation is somebody gonna pick their dog up at 3:30 or 4 o'clock? Yes. But it's always best to have the parameters established. Okay? That's my recommendation. If you don't like 3, make it 4, but
Because Naomi may not be the
Yeah, no, I
problem, but the
understand.
next homeowner may be.
Would it be sufficient to maybe change that language to say, instead of hours of operation, to state advertised hours of operation would be 8 to 3?
I think these hours are okay, and actually is a protection to neighbors to a degree. I'd be comfortable with 8 to 5, giving a little
That's what
slack.
I say.
And, you know, it'll be weekdays, and so that's,
That's what I do.
how do people feel about that as a?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
And that controls it down the road if someone else buys it and has the business and isn't as responsible. It's.
I'm for keeping it the hours that she wants it, from 8 to 3. I think it's good.
How are people, what's your take on the overall request?
I think it's reasonable.
I think it's a good home occupation in this
It's a
situation.
low intensity use, limited hours. I also like the hours that they're asking for. Will it be perfect all the time? No, but I think it's a use that we don't really have, that is needed, and it's strongly supported. And were there any negative comments from any neighbors?
We did get one piece of correspondence, I think it was in the packet. Their concern was potential noise of barking and dog feces, things like
I
that.
see.
And,
But if that did evolve, then we have a noise ordinance
Yeah,
that
we
would
have-
take care of that.
that,
I'm in favor of it.
that negative was also somebody that lives at least 3 blocks away.
Pretty far away.
They live on
Yeah.
Bluff Street.
So it's not,
Yeah.
Oh,
Not
like
a
that's a neighbor that's complaining and worried about it. This is somebody on East Bluff, and I don't know if that
Lives in a perfect.
carries any weight as far as neighborhood concerns.
I had a couple
One out
questions.
of-
Yeah, why don't we go ahead? Emily, what are you thinking?
Oh, well, one was, one's a question and then one was just a comment question. I know we got like so many comments from neighbors. Did you heard from like direct neighbors that were, I didn't know if any of these homes were on either side of you or behind or in
I
front?
asked all my direct neighbors before I even submitted the proposal.
Okay.
And everyone was fine with it. One neighbor on one side of us has a concern with our dogs barking at certain times. And I talked to her about it and I gave her my phone number. I said, we lived here for 5 years. You've never said anything I didn't know. Here's my phone number. I'm gonna try and keep the dogs quiet. If you're having people over for dinner, just let me know, whatever. And she was fine with that. So everyone else was fine with that.
Okay, good. I was wondering with the standards and then like some of the conditions we discussed, I was wondering if perhaps an additional condition, I know Naomi said that she would be the only, the owner, she'd be the only employee, but I was wondering if a condition could be that it would stay that she would be the only employee.
One of the requirements or regulations for home occupations is that it's already there as part of the code.
Okay,
Is that the only employees would be relatives or the applicant. So it's already kind of right in that
Okay,
regulation. There's a few things that are part of that no signage would be there. That there would be, the only sale of goods would be items related to the business. I think a good example, let's say that somebody wants to do hairdressing at home, then they might be able to sell some shampoos and conditioners, products that go along with that. They could maybe have one other employee, which would be a family member. They couldn't have other people as part of the business,
okay.
so.
All right, thanks. Any other comments, suggestions, questions from the planning commission? Anyone care to make a motion with some? Anyone care to make a motion on this?
I would motion to approve this.
With conditions.
Using the language here in the thing, but adjusting the hours from 8 to 5 instead of 8 to 3.
Fine.
Is that what we want? Is the 8 to 5? I mean, we talked.
Emily says no.
I think
Emily
if
says
we should-
3.
if she wants 8 to 3, I think the least amount of hours, that's,
Yeah.
I think is what I would, that's what she wants, and I think that was sufficient, if she thinks it's sufficient, and she asked for that.
It's your motion, what would
Yeah.
you like?
I'm sorry,
It's your motion, what would you like?
go ahead and take it back to 3.
8 to 3?
So as it's stated
Yes, it's.
on the screen there with the 5 conditions. All right, we have a motion and
I'll
was there a
second it.
second?
You know what, that's, if she's doing this at 3:30 and somebody's on a witch hunt, they're gonna call the cops, yada, yada, and it's gonna get silly. I think 3 is too tight. It doesn't allow for any what ifs. I would go for 4.
I mean, I would ask Naomi.
Can we ask
It's
her?
fine if you want to change the hours. If it covers me, and that's fine. I'm telling you that I don't want to work past that time, but if we want to change it to 4 or 5, I'm fine with that.
I mean, I don't expect you to be open till 4,
Right.
but I would expect
I
that
appreciate
if you
you
have a hitch,
thinking in those terms. Thank you.
that we leave the cops and everything else.
We do also have the ability to revisit this and readdress these conditions in the future should the applicant request. An example of where we did that was the small batch at the cupola room. Originally, however many years ago, when that was originally approved for special land use for restaurant, it was limited to breakfast and lunch. And I think there was a condition that they had to close by 2. And they came back a year or 2 ago and we readdressed that. We had a new special public hearing. And I believe we adjusted it so that they could be open later. So we could do that if it's needed at some future point.
Okay.
I just have one more comment. I just feel like even if you move it to 4, there's always gonna be what ifs. If the new time is 4, then there could be a 4:30 pickup, or if you move it to 5, there could be a 5:30 pickup. So,
No, I don't, I disagree with that. You're suggesting something that's not on the table.
Oh, well, I can, when customers drop off their dogs, I can give them an estimated time when their dogs will be done. And also tell them that they need to be picked up by 3 o'clock.
And if there's an
no
emergency, they have an emergency.
If they have an emergency,
Yeah.
I'm stuck.
That's my whole point. Today wouldn't be a good day to plan on coming from Petoskey in a half hour to get to your house by 3 because there's a
Well, I
million
mean,
people.
what if someone got in an accident and killed on the way? Someone wants to pick a boat, I'll say that.
So,
Okay.
can I,
Yes.
you have a motion on the floor.
Yeah, Bob, if you have a motion, and what is your motion at this point?
I want to change the time till 4 o'clock.
Okay, let's just.
All right, so we have a motion on the table to
Approve.
Do we have a second with Nancy?
And I will second 4 o'clock. Yeah, that was me, and that's fine.
4 o'clock.
Do a roll call on that?
Any other discussion on that? All right, let's go to a roll call vote.
Rick Tarczynski,
Yes.
Vanessa Warren,
yes.
Emily Dubé,
Yes.
Bob Thoma,
Yes.
Bill Mulder,
Yes.
Mark Boudet,
Yes.
Barry Lustgarten,
Yes.
Nancy Rundell.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay.
I don't expect you to take it.
No, I appreciate you thinking.
Okay.
Thank you for doing this.
I think another side note, let's say that happens one time and someone does call and make a complaint to me that there was a violation of the condition. I think the other side of this is we would contact Naomi. We would say, hey, we had a concern, we had a complaint. What would you do to rectify this in the future? And I think if we didn't have a follow-up issue, I don't think we would really be in a situation where we would be issuing any type of zoning violation. If it became reoccurring.
Yeah.
If it was happening every day, then I think we would have an issue, and I don't think that's the case.
Okay, great. Well,
Yay for you.
members of the public, we're about to move on to the next agenda item. If you came for this particular item, you're welcome to leave, but you're also welcome to stay. And whatever you please, don't worry, we won't think you're rude if you do leave.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Sure.
No,
Yeah.
This thing, should I come in and?
Richard, thank you. Yeah, just stop in, whenever you want, and we'll take care of that.
Thank you very much. I
Yeah,
appreciate
well,
it.
good luck.
Good luck.
You're gonna be busy. We don't have to say that.
I don't
Yeah.
care.
You don't care.
Thank you for coming, Tony. Thank you guys for coming.
All right, moving on to the item B is site plan review for the Pennsylvania House condominium. Jeff, what do we need to know about this one?
So, and Jared is here to help discuss this. They are doing work at the Pennsylvania House condo. It sounds like the majority of the work is under the surface, but in doing that, they have to lift the buildings off and put them back. It sounds like they may just choose to tear the buildings down and rebuild. So pretty much it's going to be the removal of garages and the replacement of garages at the same location. However, they do plan on making one change. which is to create a canopy that connects the two buildings for a covered walk area. And that would extend to the building itself, providing a covered area for those people to walk. That all complies with the height regulations. Let me get some pictures here, adjusting the size of this. So here, this is garage 1, garage 2, and then the covered area connecting to the main building there. And I'll let Jared take over and provide more detail of what they would like to do.
Great. Yeah, the only other change,
Could you
significant
introduce
change.
yourself for the record?
Jared Hammond, Birchwood Property Management, condo association manager for Pennsylvania House. The only other significant change we would be making is the garage on the east side currently as it lays is not centered with this front entry. So we would shift that approximately 4 feet to the east. So you have a centered entry, nice feng shui or whatever you want to call it. The reason we're moving towards a rebuild instead of a relocate, just due to the logistics and costs involved of trying to salvage these buildings. They've settled significantly. The foundations have to be replaced entirely. There is a metal culvert running underneath these garages that is failing. So we decided the best course would be to demolish these. We will reroute the drainage through the parking lot where it should have been going initially, and essentially rebuild in essentially the same footprint with a slight shift of the east garage, just so it's centered with the center entry of the condo building, and attach them with a breezeway up to the front entrance. Did speak with Eagle regarding the reroute of the stormwater drainage. We are all clear there. We don't need permits. We're far enough away from the lake, and Emmett County as well agreed with that assessment. So
You're gonna do it between Labor Day and April, or?
we are now hoping to be able to start demo fall after Labor Day 2024.
2024. So it won't be done during this summer season.
Correct.
That's-
I don't think, none of the neighbors and none of the co-owners want that.
Yeah.
So we would have construction throughout the winter and hopefully be done by Memorial Day or around Memorial Day of 2024 or 2025.
So we give
It's
the-
safe until then. We don't have any indication that they're gonna cave in at any point, but they have some significant settling up to 4 inches from one side back to front. And the garage slabs have several inches gaps now. So
If we okay it now and it doesn't start for over a year, is that a problem?
So the site plan approval is good for a period of 1 year.
Yeah.
There is the opportunity, if they don't, but that's just sets the time for when the project needs to start.
Right.
If they don't start within that time, there is room for, you can come back to the planning commission for an extension for 1 year.
we'll need that
I was
extension.
gonna say, but they know they're gonna need it already. And you can only get one extension.
Starting consists of turning a shovel full of dirt.
Getting a permit.
What we've interpreted and used as a standard for that is that they would need to pull their building permits and there would need to be at the start of some physical activity on the site.
Turning a shovel full of dirt.
I just wouldn't want them to run into a problem.
Yeah.
With,
Removal
you can
of
only get
those
one
garages,
extension.
they be considered.
We'd have to discuss and figure that out. but, yeah.
My concern is with contractor availability post-COVID. I'm sure everyone has experienced it, the labor shortage. A 1-year time frame for a rebuild project of this size, to be able to start from planning to shovel in is not realistic in today's environment.
That's just my concern for
I
you,
don't-
because
I
you
don't
can
know if
only
there's
get one
any
extension.
special consideration that can be made, so we don't have to come back here in a year.
That's just my concern, because you can only ask for one extension, and then if you don't make that, you don't get
That's a
another.
significant problem. It would be your choice, but correct me if I'm wrong, the applicant could bring this back at a later time that would be more in line with his construction timeline. Is that correct, Jeff?
I mean, you can always reapply at any time. All that means, let's say that they don't start within the time frame and they choose not to ask for renewal. Go ahead, John.
Yes, John?
Well, my suggestion would be, we did the review on it.
Right.
It's really a slam dunk. They're tearing down, rebuilding.
Right.
My suggestion would be is table the request, then put it on your October agenda to approve it, which then gives them the year
Okay.
to cycle, so they don't,
They don't have to reapply
have
and
to
all that.
reapply.
They don't have to pay again.
That's where I was going. I didn't know if the applicant had to ask for that.
The applicant should ask for it, but as a recommendation, I would say, if you're concerned about the extension, just hold off on the
Hold it off till
Yeah,
October.
well, I would
Request.
that, yeah, because I would think that you'd want to have a good sense of where we stand on this, so you can plan accordingly.
Exactly,
The
that's-
lead times you just referenced.
Exactly, and then we need to have approval before we
Right.
solidify contracts with vendors. We don't want to go that
Should we have
far.
a short discussion, just so you can
Yeah.
gauge
All right, let's do that.
what, maybe it's a slam dunk, according to John.
Yeah, John.
I don't have a problem with it at all. But maybe if I were the applicant, I would want to know where we all sit.
That's a great point. John, do you want to tell us what we ought to consider on this thing?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of meeting all the site requirements, it satisfied everything. My suggestion would be that the planning commission would delay approval until October meeting. And proceed along those lines. Basically make a motion to postpone consideration until the October meeting. And that should take care of it.
I don't see a problem with it, but the timing.
The one thing that came up when we were having an initial staff discussion review of this was not anything related to zoning and whether they met code or not, but just the how the organization of construction would happen. That's a busy road with a lot of pedestrians and bike users and various other things. And there's not a ton of room for the scope of the project that's there. And I think the idea was just making sure that they contact and work with the police department or who else maybe is needed to make sure that there is a safe passage for pedestrians and bicycle users on the street and on the side of the street, that they don't impact that too much.
Is that addressed already in the codes as far as when construction's going on, they can't?
I think a big part of it is what they're indicating is delaying construction until the summer season, until the fall season, when a lot of the seasonal people are not here.
But you are right, within the building code, there are requirements that, and there's also a whole pile of OSHA requirements too.
Right.
On projects like
Yeah, you
this, where
can't
it's
just-
adjacent to a public right of way.
Yeah.
So
That's pretty well
they're working with good professionals, and so they'll be fine.
I think what Mr. Hammond is saying, Bob, you were just mentioning, like, why not start the clock? I think what Mr. Hammond might be saying is, he doesn't want to start the clock yet.
Oh, I
He'd like
understand.
to, okay, start the clock in
Few more months. and
October,
then
November,
something
whatever, and
happens
have it
with
do.
it again.
I just wanted to see where we might be.
I think it's a fine project.
Yeah, would anyone else like to weigh in and just tell us about your feelings on the application?
Can I ask a question?
Yes?
You're tearing down a building to build a new one. Are any of the materials going to be recycled, or are you just going to fill up the landfill with all that debris?
We have one co-owner who is like to claim a garage door. A lot of the other material we don't have a use for. Certainly be open to anyone who wanted to salvage materials off of them before demo. In fact, we welcome donors to, if they wanted garage doors for an area rental property, we would coordinate with them to salvage that. So I'm certainly open to that idea.
Okay, thank you.
Functionally, there's a lot of, warped, twisted framing, shingling can't be reused. Maybe a little bit of vinyl siding that could be
potentially reused for a shed or something. The garage door motors are, most of them are 30 years old, so limited use in those as well.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else want to weigh in on the project and how you feel about the project itself at this time?
It looks great. I'm happy it satisfies all the criteria and yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I have no problems with it. Come back. Let's
Yep, I feel the same.
redo it when it's better for them.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the improvements are great. It's definitely needed, so.
Okay, all right, so you got some pretty positive feedback. And then, Jeff, do we need a motion to postpone it, or do we need?
I think it would be best to do a motion to postpone or motion to table until the October meeting.
All right.
If that is what is everybody's liking.
Anyone care to make that motion or a different?
I move to table this until the October Planning Commission meeting.
October 2023?
Yes, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Second.
There's a second from Barry, and motion's on the table, and with a second to postpone the consideration of this application until the October 2023 Planning Commission meeting. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. All right, motion passes, and we'll consider this again in October. Thank you very much, Mr. Hill. You'd be welcome to stay or whatever you please.
I'm on penthouse clock. Pull that out.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
You can stay. Oh, you can stay. No, you can
No.
stay.
All right. Next thing on the agenda is a report to you all from the Zoning Code Subcommittee. And we've been looking forward to giving you the latest and have been working hard. We've been meeting every couple of weeks or so. And Jeff is going to bring it up. Good. And why don't you go ahead, Jeff? I'm going to just stand up. You guys find that?
You want a pointer?
Yeah. All right, so everything that you're seeing here is just a status report from the people on the zoning subcommittee. There's nothing etched in stone. These aren't recommendations. There's no action needed tonight. None of us have to approve anything, disapprove anything. We're actually just looking to get in sync with the overall planning commission and to get your input and to just begin getting everybody thinking about what we've been coming up with. Okay, next slide, please, Jeff. So the purpose of this update is pretty much what I just said. And here, for refreshing of memories, here's who's on the subcommittee: Mark, Emily, Rick, and me. Bob is an alternate. And Jeff, Victor, and John have been sitting in on the work sessions that we've been having. Here's a new piece of information that just came out. It's a housing needs assessment published by Housing North, a nonprofit housing advocacy group that we help fund a position for. And it's the Emmett County Housing Ready Director is who we help fund for 2 or 3 years, I can't remember, as do other municipalities, as do some nonprofits. And they just hired this Bowen National Research, and they came up with a 596-page analysis and report of the Penn County area, which we're part. And it contains demographics, a whole bunch of current housing stats and income levels and cost of housing and different options and that kind of thing. And projections for housing demand, which is the most interesting, and some broad recommendations. The only hitch is that the analysis is at a county level, and then we have to kind of project what that means to the Harbor Springs area and to City of Harbor Springs. And that's going to be imperfect, but you'll see what I did on the next slide. And here's the key finding, I think, out of this whole report. And they've gone and estimated what they think the housing gap is that we have. And in Emmett County, we need almost 3,300 housing units of all kinds over the next, well, it's only 4 years now. And when we took that down to the Harbor Springs area, this is Roughly, it's the city and the 6 townships north of us. It comes out to about whatever that adds up to 700 some housing units over the next 4 years. That's a tall order. That's a really tall order. But that's the demand. And then when we take it down to actually our 1.25 square mile area with 3.7% of the population of Emmett County in the city, we need to come up with ideally another 120 some dwelling units. And those are made up of both for sale units and rental units. And that doesn't say that we, have to, or that, and the planning commission can't command housing to be built. The city can't command housing to be built. It's private property and free enterprise. And people, do what they're going to do. But that just gives us an idea of the demand. So as we're thinking about housing and as we're thinking about our zoning, about what we're trying to incent and disincent, there is demand out there. The other thing that's new is that this analysis showed more demand for the purchase of homes rather than rental units. And that's a switch from a previous report that was out there about 3 or 4 years ago. So, any questions on that? And then, so this I made this package so it could be a standalone document in case any residents want to catch up with, what we've been talking about. So some of this we've seen before in our presentation to City Council, but I'm just going on the record about why we're updating the zoning code or why we believe we need to. And the first one, of course, is to get it in sync with the master plan that we recently completed the updates on. And then we want to be proactive in anticipating what the future needs are of Harbor Springs residents. We are the planning commission, and we could just sit and wait for people to apply for things, but the alternative is to get out in front and try to be proactive and anticipate what people are going to want and need. Demand in the region remains high. We saw that from that report. Our demographics continue to point to a aging population and smaller household sizes, which we think leads to maybe some different ideas about housing in our city. And we want to provide more choices for residents about how they configure their property as they get older and as their household makeup changes and other changes in their requirements. So that's stated for the record. That's why we're considering this right now. And you saw this slide before too. These are the kind of macro changes that we're considering in the zoning code about simplifying, streamlining, modernizing, replacing words with tables and illustrations, hot links, remove requirements that are addressed in the building codes, sync up with our neighboring entities where it makes sense, and try to eliminate bureaucratic processes. And we've been pushing ourselves hard on the subcommittee to try to, eliminate approvals if we think it doesn't make sense. And the same thing that we've been hearing from the overall planning commission. Okay, here's concept one. This took us about 4 meetings. And we all got dipped in this a little bit by John earlier this year when we were looking at the uses for each zoning district and the setbacks and all the aspects of each of the zoning districts. And we on this one, we pushed ourselves pretty hard to say, how far could we take it? How far does it make sense to actually collapse the zoning districts? And we came up with this approach. John, do you have your map?
I got the map.
Yeah, let's hand those out because it's.
I couldn't.
Well, I think
Go away.
Thank you. Just give it 2 minutes to soak this in. It takes a while. So what we found is that there is significant consolidation possible. And not only that, but we think it's desirable, and it would bring simplicity and clarity, make it easier to understand for residents and easier to administer for city staff. Okay, and now Jeff, if you would. All right, so here's what happened. Here's what you're looking at is the biggest change is in the existing zoning for residential. So AR, R1B, R1C, TR and R2, we are suggesting could be collapsed down to something new called residential neighborhood. And that's the vast majority of our square footage or whatever in the city. And that's the, what color is that? What do you
It's
call it?
light yellow.
Light yellow, we're calling it. That's the majority that you see there. And there are a couple key aspects that make this work. And we'll show you those in just a second. R1A and R1E are the two existing biggest zoning, biggest area zoning districts. And we can collapse most of that into something that we're calling residential waterfront. And that you really have to be a waterfront property in order to be in that zone. And we think the characteristics are different enough that that makes sense. And those colors are dark green.
Dark
blue.
Dark blue.
You wanna give that-
So that's what you're seeing. It's only in a couple zones in the city. Then residential multiple would stay the same. Mobile home park would stay the same. CBD would stay the same, but we're proposing to expand the boundaries a little bit. Pick up another block, I think it is, some aspects. And that's, yeah. And that's not to be confused with well, I just blanked out on the initials for our overlay, where we take the TIF money.
Oh, the
DDA.
The DDA.
DDA, thanks.
Right.
So this potential expansion of our boundaries for the central business district don't necessarily mean that the DDA would be expanded. Could be, but doesn't require it. We're also taking 3 existing business zoning districts and condensing that into something called convenience business. And then waterfront and waterfront 1 become waterfront, and the last 2 remain the same. So in this concept, we go from 17 zoning districts down to 9. And we can talk anytime. Just if you have any thoughts or questions. feel
I
free
have
to-
a couple,
Yep.
just because obviously I'm interested about the residential condensing, which I love. I mean, I think this is a great beginning and you guys worked really hard. I have a couple concerns. R2, which I'm very familiar with. And some of the lots in that R2 zone, they're like 22 lots, I think, on Main Street and right down the way that are now are R2. I wouldn't want us to do anything to lower the level of density on those. That's a concern of mine, just because I think that's important. Also, there are a number of those lots that are partly R2, partly R1C, or there's some lots that have like 3 different zones on the same lot. And so I'd have to look up the map again, but I know there are some of them on Main Street that are partly R2, partly R1, partly, I think there's some that are partly RM also. So I just don't know what you did with those. From here, it looks like you made them all the RN. And I'm just concerned about decreasing the density on some of those lots.
Good.
That's just a concern. I think it's a great thing to do, is to collapse these. I think that's great, as long as we don't decrease our density.
Okay.
That's my thought.
Let's take a look
Yeah.
at what we're envisioning for each of these new ones.
Yeah.
Then we can address that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bob.
I just want to thank all of you who have been involved in this.
Yeah.
This is monumental.
This is great.
Nice work. Thank you. I
Yeah.
like it.
Yep.
Yeah, good work.
Let's learn more.
Next page.
That was a Yeah.
Oh, that was the cue?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
My potato brain.
So here's what we're thinking, and this, like I say, it took 4 work sessions to get to all this and work through all the different permutations. And so what we're proposing is a minimum lot width of 52 feet and a minimum lot depth of 132 feet. And lot configuration about 1 to 2.5 in terms of proportions. And that basis comes from our existing smallest platted lots in the city of Harbor Springs. And Jeff, those are where, Thursday.
Right now, our existing small platted lots are primarily in what's now the R1C zoning district. And the area where we see these sizes most standardized and prominent is in the Leighton Parks platted subdivision, which would be the subdivision that's in and around the IGA.
Oh, yeah.
Those lots are 65 feet by 132 feet deep. We do have one platted subdivision below the bluff, which is the Southern and Crandall's addition. And that's platted subdivision. They are about 52 feet wide and 132 feet deep.
Great. And the maximum lot coverage we're suggesting would stay at 35%, same as today. The minimum dwelling size would get a bit smaller, and this is taken from the Emmett County zoning code. So that's a pretty small dwelling, but that's what the county allows. We think economics would probably almost always have someone build a bigger structure. And so we had to set a minimum, so that's what we're proposing, is to sync up with the county. All right, Jeff, could you? So here's the secret sauce that could make all this work. And that is the front yard setback would no longer be fixed as we do today, but it would be an average of the front setbacks of other homes on the lot. And that's kind of an approach that we defaulted to when somebody's made approaches or made a request. And I know the ZBA kind of goes there too, trying to figure out what's right, and what could look appropriate. So that's a concept that John brought to us that he's seen work in some other communities. And so that would be the houses on the block, on your street, and take an average of those. And then we talked a lot about front porches, and front porches we thought were so desirable and so beneficial to a community that we're recommending that we allow those to stick out 7 feet more than the face of the home itself. And that there'd be some conditions, the porch would have to be covered, and it couldn't be, with permanent materials to make it in effect, part of the side of the house. But porches get people out, porches have neighbors talk to each other, and they're just beneficial for so many reasons. So that was an interesting thought that John brought us to. Then the side yard setbacks we're saying would be 8 feet or 12% of the lot width, whichever is greater. So this is what lets this concept work, where we could have a lot that was, 52 feet wide, just a small, or a lot that's 100 feet wide, and the side yard setbacks would adjust automatically. And so that's why we think we don't need to specify, different residential zoning districts just to get different lot sizes. So, and the rear yard setback would be 30 feet fixed up. I think that's fair to neighbors and gives plenty of room for someone to build something in their lawn.
But you can build in that space. You can put your garage back.
We'll show you where you can build. And these guys now have a diagram. So this is for the primary structure on the lot. Let's go to the next page for the accessory structure in this proposed approach. And then the front setback isn't applicable because we don't allow accessory buildings in the front yard. Side yard setback would be the same as for the primary structure, which was the 8 feet or 12%. So it is actually a little bit more than we allow today, which is 5 feet.
In some zones. In R2, it's 10 feet.
Yeah.
So it's a compromise between the two. which- Yeah, that's
I think that's fair for neighbors. Then the rear setback for an accessory dwelling would be 10 feet, which is fixed. And today's setback is 5 feet, which is pretty close. So that's kind of the secret sauce, the way this would work, and Jeff can go on more. And this is what you're probably looking at. And this shows a lot in this example, which is one of the smaller ones, John, is that right?
That's the smallest one.
Yeah, smallest one. So buildable area right there. And accessory building is shown where it's farthest back and farthest over it can possibly be.
The buildable area on this lot is 2,756 feet.
Yeah, so this is our smallest lot. And the ground floor buildable area under this proposal would be 2,700 some square feet. So that's a pretty fair sized house on one floor, and then it could be 2 floors. So upwards of 5,000 square feet on a pretty small lot, but still leaving, we think, decent side yard setbacks.
Really like the front porch. That it can come out. I mean, you all know, we use our front porch.
Doesn't the ZBA see porch
We just did what they just did.
requests all the time?
Yeah.
All the time.
I think that's probably one of our most common requests. And, you know, I think we're recognizing that. And because a lot of the times, the request is coming from, my neighbors are this close, I would like to be that close also.
Mm-hmm.
So this really, it allows us to take into consideration what all the properties are, where the front of their house is, and how far out. It will be a little bit more work in establishing what somebody's front yard setback is. We'll have to, you know, they will have to do some of that work to identify those things. But it will enable us administratively to say, here's how far out your neighbors are, that's how far out you can go. And it should hopefully limit the number of requests we get at the ZBA for front yard, front porches, because we're already helping that. And hopefully then the ZBA will say, well, we've already addressed this. You need to really provide your reasons why you need a variance, so.
One of our previous mayors, I'm showing my age, I think it was in the 80s when John Kenyon was mayor, wrote a great essay about front porches. Because they have a front porch and how important they are in small towns. It's
How they
great.
get people out.
I'm sure Mark still has a copy of it.
triangulation and-
Yeah, I mean, it just makes, we sit on our porch almost every morning and we see, I can't tell you how many people we visit with for the first half an hour of the day. And I think people who are visiting town, they love it. I mean, a lot of them this time of year aren't people that live here. And they love it when somebody's sitting there and says, good morning, or has a grandchild in their hand or whatever we're doing these days.
Regrettably, we don't have a front porch because the house didn't allow that.
Yeah.
But we sit on the front steps.
Yeah,
All the
yeah,
time.
yeah, it's
And
just,
people with dogs.
And for the 3 months we can do it, right?
yeah, it's a nice part of it.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the big picture on the residential neighborhood proposed zoning district. That's the concept. So soak that in a little bit. Let's move on to the waterfront. So the waterfront district that we're proposing would be significantly larger dimensions. The minimum lot width would be 100 feet, the depth would be 250 feet. And that also puts it in a proportion of 1 to 2.5. And the basis for these dimensions comes from a nice analysis Jeff did of the existing lots that would be in this proposed zoning district. So it's a pretty generous slug of existing property. And this is, you know, right in smack in the center of that. So
This is Glen Drive, a lot of Glen Drive and Elwood and, right?
Yeah, and if you look at the map, this is, yes, Glen Drive,
Yeah.
Delwood Lane,
Yeah.
but also some of the properties in Weequay over on Bay Street.
But we have a handful of very small ones right there on the water.
Right by the beach,
Yes.
yes.
Oh, those are the boathouses. I mean, those are the existing.
And there's, you know, there are already with our existing code, some existing nonconformities. And with these changes, I don't think it's gonna worsen or resolve any of those. There will still be existing nonconformities. I don't think that we're dramatically changing any of our requirements here too much in this district. So it's not a large change. from what we currently have.
Is this a body of water or is this a waterfront property?
It's a pond,
Thank you.
Wetlands, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is that off of Glen?
just like the one on the
Third
up
Street?
here.
Okay.
Just pond.
Teeny tiny.
I know it is.
Okay, same lot coverage and minimum building size, 560 square feet. It'd be very unlikely someone would build a 560 square foot lot.
Be cute.
House on a very expensive lot. Okay, proceed, Jeff. Thank you. So the primary structure, we're saying, the front yard, so, remember we have a street and a lake with these. So we're saying that the front yard is the street side, just definitionally to keep it straight. And that the front yard setback, because there really aren't blocks on some of these properties, would be the average front setback of the 3 homes on either side of the property. So we kind of compute the where those front faces are in order to come to a front setback for these properties. Same definition, the front face of the building would be where we measure that from, and giving permission for a front porch, again, an extra 7 feet beyond that. Side yard setback is 8 feet or 12%, just like we saw before. And the rear yard, which is the water side, definitionally, setback is a fixed 35. And many people have much more than
Why
that.
we set it at 35 instead of 30? I'm just curious. Why is it set at 35 instead of 30 when the other residential says 30?
Oh.
I think it was a 2-part thing there. One was the rear yard setback in that neighborhood was already larger.
Right.
And secondly, it's making sure that we're staying far enough away from the high water mark and any other issues with FEMA floodplain things.
Okay. I'm just curious why.
And as we learned, I think from Mark, who taught us that the guidelines now are more like 60 feet in terms of building codes and eagle requirements. Am I remembering?
Yeah,
right?
it's 60 pretty much all the way around the Great Lakes. Nowhere, like for the county, for example. But municipalities like Harvard can have a different number.
Oh, I was just gonna ask that.
But we are, most places are 60
Are
feet
they?
from the
Okay.
historical high water mark, but that has changed just recently because they've recalculated some stuff and also with the FEMA, that's changed too. Now they're kind of 3-foot surge on top of where they think the floodplain is already. So there's a lot has changed
Lot going on
recently
with that.
because FEMA is really upping their standards, I think, because of insurance lobbies
Yeah.
who, they're trying to limit their exposures.
Right.
So we've seen a big change in that just recently.
So we might say setback is 35 feet, and then when they go to get all their permits, they
It's
might
gotta
find
be
out they
six.
actually have
It's
to
gonna be
build
6,
65 feet back or more, depending on their shoreline.
Or more likely it's going to be the elevation of the finished floor has to be
I know.
above, would depend on the municipality, whether you have to be at or above 1 foot or 2 feet above. The building code requires that you be a foot above the floodplain. But in all practical purposes, you really need to be at least 2 feet just because the capillary action will take water up at least a foot.
Yeah.
And so from a practical standpoint, it should be 2 feet.
Okay.
Okay, and then we get into accessory buildings. And so we have had requests, remember, for waterfront properties where they wanted to build an accessory building like a shed in what we're calling now the front yard. We're saying that we recognize that. We're going to have a process for that. And we would have a special land use for someone who requested that. And, that we, as a group, we might decide, that's still too much administration. Maybe we'll have a different approach. I don't know. Side yard setback the same and rear yard setback the same for it as the principal structure. Any reactions on waterfront at this time?
Is a gazebo considered an accessory building if it's open on all sides? And
Structure,
so it would be considered.
Above grade.
if you're above grade, you're a structure.
Okay. I could just see someone doing that on the water.
Oh,
side,
absolutely.
And just something to think about.
Water side is the rear yard and no special
Well,
anythings are
that's
needed.
true. That's
right?
true. Yeah, that's
That's
true.
right.
And this isn't really much of a deviation from what we currently have.
Yeah.
Okay, So soak on that for a little bit. Yeah, here's the diagram you've got in front of you. Similar structure with that. All right, we'll move on. Okay. And we just started to discuss multifamily options in light of the findings from the fact that our households are getting older and our households are getting smaller and the demand is high. You know, we're thinking it's time to consider a measured way to get into some multifamily, making it more easy for residents to build multifamily dwellings. And so duplexes are by far the most likely option, and they're a possibly efficient way to fill some missing middle housing needs. We did a search of a bunch of designs, and this is one of them, and we found that they can be quite attractive if done well, and it can preserve the character of the neighborhood. They can be, you know, as big as a regular detached single-family home, and yet house two households. And another benefit for an owner who might want to build one on her property would be she could live in one and rent out the other and get some income and help out someone else, you know, in the community with a place to live, but only for long-term rental, not short-term rental. And what we're proposing is that they would be allowed in all of our, both of our proposed residential zoning districts and in the B1 zoning district. They would have the same setbacks and building envelope as other residential structures. So they can't be bigger, they can't be closer to the neighbors. It would be exactly the same as a regular detached single family home. And we require at least one parking space per unit. Jeff? And we talked a lot about, you know, style and appearance, and you know, we've all wrestled with that on various other issues. And we're proposing that we would put in some, actually put in some illustrations and some descriptions. And Mark's been helping us phrase, you know, what we see and how we could describe that to kind of come up with a look that we're after. And Victor reminds us, you know, you can't legislate a house, like, you know, you can't say, you can't build an ugly house. We're not allowed to say that. So it's going to be interesting to see if we can come to a you know, phrasing and an approach that you all are comfortable with. And our thought is you could not have an accessory dwelling unit if you have a duplex or vice versa. And you could not use any short-term rental, but you could use one or both as long-term rental. Any thoughts on duplexes?
Would be interesting to see, like on this map, how many are part of associations, to see what can and can't go in, to see what
It would.
opportunities we have.
You're right, because there's condo associations in town
Yeah.
where there are rules.
Drive.
They are, yeah.
Like I'm part of an association for 8 lots, which is, and I know across the street. And
Maybe good to make those a different color source.
Yeah, or an overlay or something. Yeah, that's interesting.
just to see where we can get these options in.
And I would think maybe suggestions would even be helpful to some people, rather than you only can build these 4 styles of houses, but here's what we would like. It might be interesting to see, just to help people see what be a little more graceful.
I've seen a couple of things lately where cities have prepared pre-approved designs for different things like ADUs and for duplexes. You know, it has the floor plan, it has the measurements, it has everything.
Yeah.
And Bob might come in to see Jeff and say, hey, I'd like to talk about building something on my property. And Jeff would say, well, here, Bob, take a look at these 17 designs that are pre-approved. And Bob might like one of those. And you wouldn't have to come for any approval at all.
Yeah, the plus would be you would just be able to do that.
Right.
Yeah,
You create they refer to it as a pattern book.
yeah, I saw one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I don't know if we want to get too far, but that's something that communities are doing to encourage some of these structures. Any other reactions to duplex? Remember, we don't have to decide anything tonight. None of this is final. This is just to get your input.
Can I have a reaction?
Sure.
Okay, so there's an architect out west, I think he's in Washington State, his name is Ross Chapin, Chapin, and his big claim to fame is that he's been developing something called pocket neighborhoods for decades. He has a book out and it's about pocket neighborhoods, and our library doesn't have it, but they can get it for us if you don't want to spend money on it. I would love for the planning commission members to have a look at it, because he's got all kinds of successful plans in neighborhoods that he builds in usually what he calls throwaway pieces of land in a town. And he's got all the guidelines figured out about how many small homes you need to build in order for the little community, the little neighborhood to succeed. You can have this many and you'll succeed, you have this many and you won't succeed. He's out west, so he's got style guidelines. You can tell that these houses are really in tune with the Pacific Northwest vernacular. But that kind of thing, there's a guy down in Beaufort, South Carolina, Eric Mosher, does a similar kind of thing. And his houses are in tune with the vernacular of the Low Country. So you can pick out that these are Eric Mosher properties because they look like South Carolina. You can recognize Ross Chapin because they look like they're from the Pacific Northwest. But the idea there is a lot of these problems have been worked out by these guys, especially Chapin, and he talks about multifamily options. He talks about building for the vernacular of the locale. You can say to people, no, you're not going to build any purple stucco houses because it really doesn't belong in Harbor Springs. Oh, by the way, there is one up on Fairview, and how controversial has that property been since the absolute beginning? So what I'm saying is, please, there's a lot of this stuff is out there. The wheel doesn't have to be reinvented. A lot of architects have been working on it already. Take a look at Ross Chapin's book. It might spark some ideas. Aspen, Colorado, we've talked about this before, I think, with the Planning Commission, historical guidelines. You don't have to be, you can do this, you can't do that. They simply can say, here's a plan book, here's a style book for Harbor Springs. We have a style in Harbor Springs. We all know that. We have beautiful gingerbread, we have certain kinds of clapboard. You know, our houses look like Harbor Springs. They don't look like Santa Fe, which that one up on Fairview and Ann Street does. It's Santa Fe, it's pure Santa Fe. And everybody reacts usually negatively to it. So I'm just saying,
Okay, so there's
a lot out there to work with. Maybe a thing to look at would be some Eric Mosher, maybe to look at Ross Chapin. Some of these problems have been solved in other communities. And Ross Chapin especially, because he started out by building 850 square foot houses that became super popular because they had to throw away land, people wanted a smaller house, and they were desperate for how are we going to house people that really want to live here, but can't afford or don't want to try to afford 5,000, 15,000, 20,000 square foot buildings.
Part of the issue with pocket neighborhoods here, and a group of us looked at a piece of property in town that would hold 6. The property was approximately $600,000.
Yes.
That's $100,000 a house before utilities and improvements. So now we're at 135.
Somehow towns, he has worked with towns and found outside money to help sort of get these things constructed. I mean, I can't say that for sure. That's always a question I wonder, Jeff. Isn't there money out there that if the city undertook the challenge of we really need housing that's more realistically sized, more realistically priced, isn't there a way to do that?
There's a lot of different options available for a lot of different styles of projects. We have language already in our zoning code that allows for planned development units, which can be done in various different ways. Some of them can be high-end homes like we have here, the Bay Street cottages. That's kind of a little pocket neighborhood.
It is.
And there's ours is kind of open in a way where somebody can come in with a property, and the planning commission has the ability to work with them on whatever plan they come up with. And it provides us the ability to maybe grant some special scenarios for how they can do something, but it allows us to have some involvement when it comes to style and design, which was implemented then also with the Cottage Company's project between Bay and Maine down there with, we allowed them to do some certain things, but then we also said with those special permissions, you're going to then do some of these things so that we could help, kind of, I guess, in a way dictate style to some extent. A lot of communities have a lot of different options available to them. Boyne City actually owned property that they said, we will donate the property to a developer to come in and build something because we need housing. And I think they opted in that scenario, they did some income-based housing was an opportunity there. And actually the state of Michigan just over the last year passed 4 new bills that enlarges and expands the way that and the communities that are available to do neighborhood enterprise zones, which can provide other housing opportunities to local communities to help offset costs. And that's something we can certainly look at providing more opportunities for.
Nancy, your question was about R2 and, and you're concerned about shrinking where our, a duplex could be located, for instance.
Right.
And what this recommendation is tending towards is it could be in any of the zoning districts, including.
And when I was reading that, I saw that. I just think we need to be mindful of that. Since we're trying to find more housing and not make less. I mean, I think we just have to be careful with that.
We think this would give more options, which is all we're trying to do is give property owners
Options,
more
right,
possible options.
right, which is great.
Okay, Jeff? And then the question came up about triplexes, and we came down on the side of saying, well, okay, we'll consider them as long as they're, they meet all the same requirements, size-wise and space-wise and location-wise as a duplex. But we would reserve special land use for them. Whereas with duplexes, we were saying it's a by right use, as long as it met all the specs. So think about that. We're gonna definitely want your agreement and on that or something different. And then we said quadplexes was just one too many. It was too big. It's unlikely that they'd be built, and it just felt like it was too much for our community at this time. So we're coming down on the side of no quadplexes. Think about that. All right, and then coming close to the end here, we've been talking about the walkable commercial concept, and this is the idea of mixed use. Could we, would the community benefit from having some very light impact businesses in neighborhoods? So we've had only a preliminary discussion on this, and the next steps would be to define a few of those low impact businesses and bring them back for everybody's consideration. Decide where those would be allowed in the district, would it be anywhere, everywhere? What would be the approval? And we were, thinking special land use approval like we just did tonight for the dog grooming. And so we have much more thinking to do on this, and we'd love to have your thoughts and input on that. Okay, Jeff? And then we still have a whole lot more things to talk about that we told City Council that we would explore. And those are allowable uses. And so remember, we started that process. We looked at the uses in all the different districts and business types of businesses and all that. And so we have to go now and round that up and bring it back to you for your review again. And there's a slight possibility that when we get into the business districts, we might find, oh shoot, we can't condense as far as we thought we were going to. We may have to do something else, but we think we have a pretty good chance of keeping it down to 2 districts. We talked about home occupations and what the approval process would be for that. Character districts, form-based zoning, ADUs, cottage courts, bungalow courts, tiny homes, and then methods and materials which would benefit the environment. So that's the list of future topics.
There was I would call it a tiny house. It was 750 square feet or 70 square feet that was up in the Fairview district that sold last week, I think. Was on for about a day. It had 8 offers on it, sold way above asking price. And I mean, it was just gone. It was, And I think we need to be aware of that on planning commission, that there's a lot of demand for those small little houses.
And that one wasn't even done.
And it wasn't even done.
Yeah, I think it's like 300 at sold for.
Yeah, they didn't have an occupancy permit.
Yeah.
Had a whole bunch of, had a whole bunch of issues.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
and it's
Mark, that's a
still-
good point, though.
I
It was
mean.
on
it-
Fairview?
It was unfair.
What did you say? I'm sorry, I couldn't-
Oh, just that we did not have an occupancy permit.
Yeah,
Had
they-
issues with it.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Sold already.
but it was,
They-
had a dog.
Yeah, it wasn't finished, so that this speaks to your
it
point.
just tells us that there is a demand.
And what was the asking price on it?
It was 250, but it sold for almost 300.
My question
Yeah,
is,
yeah.
will that home remain or will it be replaced with something else?
And I don't know that, but I do
Yeah.
believe there's a real demand for those, for small houses.
All right, in terms of next steps, the zoning subcommittee will keep developing recommendations and keep bringing them back for updates as often as we have something we need to share with them and worthwhile. And we're probably gonna work late into this year to get that on and
That'd be great.
work as fast as we can.
Do it by then, that would be great.
And then Jeff, do you want to just go so if you share this with anybody, we've got background slides in here about our demographics and aging and small household sizes, summary of what the trends are nationwide and statewide, anecdotes about the kinds of housing that people might like in the future. And then the big thing is the implications about our existing zoning code is a bit of a mismatch with what we think people are going to want. And here are the resources that we've been working with. And now maybe we can check out a couple that Pam recommended. Any other thoughts or direction or input for the subcommittee?
I just have a question.
Yeah.
I fear that this community is in danger of becoming a part-time, summer-only community. No matter what we decide, no matter what's built, it gets gobbled up by people from not here, who don't live here, who drive the prices continually higher and higher and higher, as in the little blue house that we're just talking about. There is no housing here. And the group that I'm involved with, when we talked about building small houses, immediately that came up. Well, rich people from downstate will just buy them instantly anyhow. And there's no way to prevent them from doing that.
There are ways.
Depending on financing, how you finance.
And deed restrictions. That's not my favorite thing.
And I fear that over a period of years, that we will become an exclusive community for the rich. And the school system will fail because there won't be any children. We're heading in a direction that I'm not happy with.
What if we?
When I've read about some of the Ross Chapin projects, because he works in tandem with towns a lot, they actually put requirements on income and size of family and the amount, the percentage each year, if someone decides to sell their house, the percentage they're allowed to sell it, resell it for. They actually structure that, and I think maybe one of the reasons they're able to do that is because they are using public funds. But their goal is to solve the problem that you're exactly describing, that you take $100,000, $200,000 house, fix it up, and whammo, it's 800 grand. But I think that's why I keep referring back to him. I think some of these problems have found some solutions in other towns, if we can just like find who's been successful at it and see if it applies or be useful to us. But I know that, I'm pretty sure Chapin's done that in some instances. So you basically, you had to qualify for the house, so you couldn't be a multimillionaire, sorry, to come buy this little 950-foot square cottage house year round. You have to live here year round. You have to own it for 2 or 3 years. If you decide that you're gonna resell it, you can't resell it for more than blah, blah percentage. So that basically, yeah, that's what you're afraid of doesn't happen. So I think it's been done.
Okay.
So maybe we could find a template.
There's a lot of different answers out there to these housing questions. And the beauty is we don't have to pick just one. you can have several different answers to this issue in a variety of different ways.
When you put a deed restriction on something, Jeff, like if you put a deed restriction that somebody has to live there 10 months a year, whatever, does that go with the property when it's, so it does?
Yes.
I think we need to be, myself personally, I think we need to be cautious of that type of restriction. Because in terms of property, personal property rights and things like that, that does have some downsides, it has some upsides.
But a lot of your condo associations have a lot of those restrictions.
Oh, I
in them
know, the
already.
condo association, but freestanding lots, which is what I have, like, I think another way to look at it is, another thought is owner operated business, where the owner needs to be on site to operate a small business in the neighborhood. It's another way of assuring someone is gonna be here year round. It's another way to look at that and putting some commercial stuff up in residential neighborhoods.
Well, you're assuming that business will be open year round and stuff.
Well, you could say, that it basically it had to be a year-round business, whether it was coffee shop, bakery, whatever. It's just one other way to look at it.
And one thing that right now that's being proposed is, the duplex would be a by right option. I think that empowers current landowners quite strongly. But it gives them more option to use their property in a way that would hopefully keep it within that ownership group now that's already existing.
Right.
Maybe stop some of the, take a house, fix it up and, triple your money kind of thing. I think this is incentivizes, present owners to really hold on to their properties and to develop them themselves to some degree, whatever degree they want to, whether it's an ADU or as a duplex.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you.
So I think this is a very progressive step
Yeah, I do
towards
too.
meeting your
I do
concerns.
too. I think it helps.
I came from a place on Long Island, in New York, called Sag Harbor, which is very, very much like this community.
Yeah.
And in my younger years, it was the home to fishermen and potato farmers, with few exceptions. And now in Sag Harbor, there are currently no year-round normal people. Town has been literally obliterated by Manhattanites who have bought everything and turned it into vacation central. There are no locals. They don't have a volunteer fire department anymore. They have a paid fire department because there are no normal human beings that will do that work. Stores are closed.
I think we have to,
Town
what
has
can we
been
do to
ruined.
incentivize year-round residents? I think that's a really important question
Absolutely.
of what makes it worthwhile to be here year-round. What are the things that make it worthwhile? And I think those are.
Well, the bigger issue is what makes it affordable.
Well, but I think, yes, it is, but I think too, if we can zone in on what makes Harbor a good place to live year round. Is there enough here that makes it a good place anymore? We've lost a lot, and I've been here a long time. So is there any of that we can bring back that used to keep us here?
I was hoping COVID would kind of turn that
Yeah.
as far as people getting out of the cities.
Yeah.
And coming, and it seemed like that was kind of the case for about a year right after. And that people were working remotely from here and
Right.
it seemed busier in the winter. It wasn't as much of a ghost town.
Well, we need to make it more attractive, and we have a certain amount of control over that by what we allow people to do when they live here. Home occupations, all sorts of stuff.
As far as affordable, that's, what we've been working on is we've condensed all these different residential sections into one. And a lot of those residential sections that were there before, you couldn't have a duplex, you couldn't have a small house. So now what we're doing is making it all one big pie, and you can put a duplex any place, which increases our chances of having more affordable houses. And we also set it up so that you can divide some of these bigger lots we've got in town. And you can put 2 or 3 houses in there, which are going to bring down the prices of each house. And it's going to increase housing for people that will be able to afford them. So we've sort of attacked the problem of affordable housing in 2 different directions and combined it into one. So with a little luck, this will work and make housing more affordable for people here.
And then we have to make sure they have a way to make a living here.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
there,
that's
there,
the
there is
part of
a
that.
demand, when I'm on these teacher and principal searches at the high school, there's lots of people who wanna work here. They can't find a house.
Yeah.
They can't find a house anywhere, and, just one success story, the house next to my mom went up for sale. It was a small house. A couple from California, they put a purchasing agreement on it. Now, they were going to do short-term rentals. When they told that there was a new rule, they were gonna be going on a list. They got out of it. The price was then driven down because of that, and a teacher has now moved in. So
We're starting to. see-
we're starting, it's starting to turn.
I think, yeah.
We were on a search for a new president at Irish Boat for over a year. And it was very difficult based on potential candidates telling us, A, you can't pay enough money for us to be able to afford to buy a home in your community. You would have to double the wage you're offering before we could afford to live here. It's,
And the high school's gonna have a number of teachers retiring now in the upcoming years. I can think of 5 in the next 2 years. And we're gonna have to get folks in here. And I've been on the interviews and they said, where can we live? We love it, but where can we live?
And businesses now, I mean, I think remote work is almost the norm at the majority of the Fortune 500 companies, and they're having trouble getting people to actually come in the office that they're now accepting, so I think that will help as well.
All right, well, good. It's rare that we get to actually have a philosophical conversation about things that are really important to us.
Can I applaud the work that you did? It was a nice presentation.
It was beautiful.
This is
Thank you.
wonderful.
Really well done.
You're doing great work.
well done.
All right, well, let's move over to our last thing, member comments. And have any other thoughts or concerns, ideas, direction? All right, well, thanks very much. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.